Welcome back. We're talking stop and frisk now. As the trial continues in federal court in Lower Manhattan, it is really, when it's all said and done, the actual practice, the tactic of the NYPD that is on trial. And it's already leading to some changes in how the cops handle street stops. Dominic, those changes, in many ways, they start even before the trial did.
That's right. On the eve of the trial date, it actually went into play, Richard, with the NYPD now demanding officers be more thorough when they document stops. Police officers must now elaborate in writing on the suspicion they use to stop the person rather than just check a box on the so-called 250 form, Richard, they are required to fill out for each stop and frisk. In other words, officers can no longer just check a box that says furtive movement. If a suspicious bulge was present, that bulge must now be described. Rich?
Thanks a lot, Dominic. And for more, we are joined by journalist Jamilah King. She recently penned a piece for the American Prospect on stop and frisk, highlighting its impact on the culture of New York City. Jamilah, thanks for a few minutes. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
It's interesting. We've spoken to just about every mayoral candidate, including Billy Thompson. And none of them, I think with the exception of one candidate, wants to ban outright stop and frisk. Many want to amend the actual procedure and process and change it, but they don't want to get rid of it. At the end of the day, do you think that's what this verdict probably would do? It won't get rid of the whole procedure, it'll only change it.
I do think that at the end of the day, this verdict that's being discussed now will actually lead to reforms of stop and frisk. I don't think it's going anywhere, and I say that because Mayor Bloomberg and Commissioner Kelly have been very, very adamant in their support of the program. They've said that they believe it. They said believe in it. They've said that it's working, and you know, the idea and notion of what's quote unquote working is something that's very, very you know, up for debate in New York City and specifically in communities of color. But you know, I do think that there are going to be some reforms, and I think those reforms are necessary.
But do you think that you can still have a process that gives discretion as to whoever law enforcement believes is credible to be stopped, that you can still have this kind of a procedure without amount of discretion, and it won't have the same kind of results we have now, which is overwhelmingly Black and Latino people being stopped in overwhelmingly minority neighborhoods? Are you okay with tweaking the system but still keeping it?
You know, I think at the end of the day, you have a lot of organizing that's going on in New York City. You have a lot of folks who are saying that no, reforms aren't enough. We want actual change. We want there to be some sort of internal process of accountability to make sure that, you know, a specific racial and ethnic group of people, which in this case are Black and brown folks, are not being targeted for the perceived actions of some folks in that group.
One of the arguments for people who support the procedure is they say, go to the Brownsvilles, go to the Bushwicks, go to the tougher areas. They don't want to go back to the days of high crime here. It's not a perfect system. Do people get singled out to do absolutely nothing wrong here and sometimes create a level of distrust even more than was there before for the communities and the cops? But consider the alternative. Can you have both safety without this level of policing in high crime-ridden areas?
So I think the issue is whether or not we as a society think that it's fair that people who have not committed any crime are treated like criminals. And in my reporting, for instance, in Brownsville, you have folks who know what it's like to grow up in a very, very violent neighborhood. They remember the days when crime in New York City was incredibly you know, rampant, and it was leading the country, and they don't want to return to those days. At the same time, the initiatives that helped get to that place are not just the initiatives that are hardcore policing and things like stop and frisk, right? You have to be able to engage the community in a conversation. You have to be able to make sure that that community does not see you as the enemy. If
you go to some of the areas that you've done a lot of your reporting in and you said, all right, here's the choice we can have. We can stick with this procedure here that the vast majority think is unfair here, and a lot of these guys can speak from firsthand perspective what it's been like here to go through it. Or we can have half the police presence we currently have, and you're not going to have the process, and as an argument for the cops at least, you're going to have less the deterrent. Which would they choose of those?
So I think with stop and frisk, all you need to do is look at the stats, right? And so Mayor Bloomberg and Commissioner Kelly have repeatedly said that the rationale for stop and frisk is to get guns off the street and make neighborhoods safer. But repeatedly you see that stop and frisks actually don't lead to the seizure of guns. Very, very few guns have actually gotten off the streets of New York City thanks to stop and frisk. What you have are a lot of low-level arrests. You have a lot of ticketing for things that, you know, every kid does, right? Hanging out late or playing basketball at the park. And folks are kind of being labeled as suspects because of those activities. And I think that's the dangerous part, right? Like, I think that it's not so black and white. You've got to be able to look at the nuance of it, and you've got to be able to figure out a way that you can keep communities safe while maintaining folks' humanity.
What was your reaction when you heard Commissioner Kelly's comments about that both minorities being understopped and also this a process that has saved minority lives? Is he right here, or is he missing the point?
I think he's missing the point. I think he's in a lot of ways missing the point that you cannot criminalize an entire racial group of people based off of the perceived actions of some folks in that group.
Again, Jamilah's piece is titled Black, Brown, and Blue, and we have linked it to our site. Jamilah, great job. I appreciate a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Dom. At the end of the day, there's people don't even talk about it. Andrew mentioned there's more than one trial going on here with stop and frisk. Does the next mayor change this more than the court, or does the court basically make it easy for the next mayor to follow?
Excellent question, and here's why I say this. This judge has ruled against stop and frisk, Judge Shira Scheindlin, numerous times over the years. So if we go on her past, you can expect something damaging against the policy to come. I don't think she's going to totally rule it as unconstitutional, but what I'm also watching very carefully here, Richard, and as you asked about the next mayor, that's why it's an excellent question. Bill Thompson, he's not leading in the polls, but he's the only African-American running, and notice what Bill Thompson said. He will not stop using stop and frisk. Right. And now all of a sudden, all the police unions are lining up behind Bill Thompson. So expect to see stop and frisk continue, modified in some way, but I don't think it's going anywhere.
Most of the candidates don't want to end stop and frisk. Most of the
and
candidates want to keep it going.
Probably about the only one, yeah. You think it's, my only problem has always been, George, that it's kind of being half pregnant. If you say we want to keep the policy, but you still want to give the discretion to the police, whether there's quotas or not, there's going to be pressures to do it. It seems totally discretionary. No matter what they say, you can't you can't write the rules so tight. I don't know. Either you have it or you don't.
It works up until the next incident.
Yeah.
And then when there is an incident of a certain magnitude where that discretion is called into question, then it blows up all over again. But I think Dominant's got it right on. I don't think it disappears. I think it stays. I think it's amended in some way. And then it's tested the next time there's a big incident, when something happens. Now, if that incident happens sometime in October of this fall, then it's going to affect the mayoral race. If it happens next February, then it's more, of a community outrage response rather than something that affects the politics of the mayoralty.
Really, we're going to wait for the verdict here. And Dom, real quickly, we think they could do closing arguments as early as when, next week?
Soon. It's coming very soon. And then it goes, they're going to be closing arguments. Remember, there's no jury in this trial. It's just Judge Scheindlin. We don't know how long she's going to take for her ruling. But the mayor or the police commissioner, neither one testified, but expect something in the next couple of weeks.
And then the appeals after that. I'm sure there will be.
Right.
All right, everybody, coming up next. Listen, it's been on every show, every day this week, and that's corruption in the Empire State, and it's gone from bad to worse. As Albany looks more and more like a police lineup, we wonder, are all the recent arrests actually good for the state because you drain the swamp here, or is it going to leave such a black eye on the institution it's going to take a long, long time to recover? RFL will continue right after this.